Jiří Trnka, Jiří Trnka, Czech, Jiří Trnka, 24 February 1912 – 30 December 1969, was a Czech puppet maker, illustrator, motion picture animator, and film director. In addition to his extensive career as an illustrator, especially of children's books, he is best known for his work in animation with puppets, which began in 1946. Most of his films were intended for adults and many were adaptations of literary works. Because of his influence in animation, he was called the Walt Disney of Eastern Europe, despite the great differences between their works. He received the International Hans Christian Andersen Medal for illustrators in 1968, recognizing his career contribution to children's literature. Biography. Formative years. Jiří Trnka was born in Pilsen, in western Bohemia, where the family lived as middle-class citizens. Although his father was a plumber and his mother a dressmaker, both remained very close to their peasant origins. As a child, young Jiří enjoyed sculpting puppets made of wood and put on small shows for friends. He later attended classes at a vocational school in his hometown, where he met his teacher Josef Šťupa, who eventually would become a leading public figure in the world of Czech puppeteers. Šťupa was his mentor, entrusted Trnka with certain responsibilities, and managed to convince his family, who were initially reluctant, to allow him to enroll at the prestigious School of Applied Arts in Prague, where he completed his apprenticeship between 1929 and 1935. Career as illustrator. With the training received in the School of Arts and his experience working in a printmaking workshop, Trnka soon began a successful career as an illustrator. He was hired by the Prague publishing house Melantrich, and his first illustrated work was Tigr Pana Boska, The Tiger of Mr. Bosek by Václav Smejk, published in 1937. Since then, Trnka illustrated numerous children's books. Throughout his life, he illustrated 130 works of literature, most of them for children. Especially famous are his illustrations for the tales of the Brothers Grimm, as well as collections of folktales from Czech authors such as Jiří Horek and Jan Pálniček. Also related to his native folklore are his illustrations for Bajoja by Vladimír Halin, published in 1955, which would also be the starting point for his future in animation. In addition to the above, Trnka illustrated the tales of Andersen and Perrault, the fables of La Fontaine, The Thousand and One Nights, several works of Shakespeare, and Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland. In some cases, his job as an illustrator gave him ideas for making animated films, as happened with Bajoja and A Midsummer Night's Dream. Trnka has also created some children's books as writer and illustrator, for example Through the Magic Gate, published in 1962 in London. The biennial Hans Christian Andersen Award conferred by the International Board on Books for Young People is the highest recognition available to a writer or illustrator of children's books. Trnka received the Illustrator Award in 1968 for his lasting contribution. He also taught. His pupils included Daniela Havlíková. Career as animator. Beginnings. After graduating from the Prague School of Arts and Crafts, Trnka created a puppet theater in 1936. This group was dissolved when World War II began, and he instead designed staged sets and illustrated books for children throughout the war. Several years later, at the end of World War II, he founded with Eduard Hoffmann and Jiří Trnka. He began his activity in the study of animation by making some 2D animated short films, Zasadil Dedek Ripu Grandfather Planted a Beet, 1945, Zvířátka Petrovsky Animals and Bandits, 1946, which was awarded at the first Cannes Film Festival, just 1 year after he had begun working in films. Despite his early success, Trnka did not feel comfortable with traditional animation, which in his opinion required too many intermediaries that prevented him from freely expressing his creativity. In the fall of 1946, he first considered puppet animation films and began to experiment with the help of Bretislav Pajar. Early films 1947-1950. The result was his first feature film Spalíček, the Czech ČeK, 1947, based on a book illustrated by Mikolas Ailes. The film consists of 6 short films which put on stage the legends and customs of his country: Carnival Masopust, Spring Jaro, the legend of Saint Procopius Legendo or Svetum Procopu, the procession party in the village Posvicny and Bethlehem. The film attracted international attention to Czech animation and was awarded at many festivals, including the Venice Film Festival. Since 1948, the studios of Trnka began receiving subsidies from the government. The next film they produced was Cesar of Slavic, the Emperor's Nightingale, 1949, based on the 1843 fairy tale The Nightingale by Hans Christian Andersen. Unlike the previous, it is a real feature film with one single storyline. The movie also includes real actors' 2 children, Helena Patrikova and Jaromír Sobota, although only in the prologue that precedes the story itself. The puppets and sets are significantly different from the previous film, given the setting of an idealized imperial China. Cesar of Slavic also won numerous awards at international festivals across Europe and the United States. Throughout 1949, Trnka also made 3 short films with animated puppets: Romanes Basu, story of a bass or novel with bass adapted from a story by Anton Chekhov, Surt of Emlyn the Devil's Mill, and Ari Prurai, Song of the Prairie, a Western parody loosely based on Stagecoach, known in Trnka's country as the. The following year, he produced his 3rd feature animation with puppets, Bajoja the Prince Baye, 1950, based on 2 stories by writer Bozna Nemkova. Set in a fantastic medieval time, it is the story of a farmer who succeeds in becoming a knight, defeats a dragon, and wins the love of a princess. The 50s. During the first half of the next decade, Trnka experimented with new techniques in his short animations. He returned to the cartoon Ozilate Ribs the Golden Fish, 1951, and animated shadow puppets in DVA Imrezasign, 1953. In Beasley Circus, The Merry Circus, 1951, he used a technique that involved stop motion with 2-dimensional paper cutouts. He neglected, however, the production of any animated feature-length puppet film. Apparently, for a time he had the idea of making a film about Don Quixote, but the project was not well received by the Czechoslovakian authorities. In 1953, he premiered Stare Posty Sesk, Old Czech Legends, 1953, his quarter-length movie. As with Spalíček, his first feature, Stare Posty Sesk, is structured in 7 episodes that tell the legendary history of the Czech people. The film is adapted from a work by Illustrator Jurásek, 1851-1930, then a popular author among the Czech youth, and has an obvious patriotic tone. In the same vein of exploring the classics of Czech literature, Trnka in 1955 faced the challenge of adapting to the screen a work immensely popular, the anti-war satire Osady Dobrého vojáka Svědka za světovou války of Jaroslav Hasek, The Good Soldier Svědč. At the time, there already existed film adaptations of this work done with real actors, but Trnka was the first to make an animated film about the character. For the construction of the puppets, Trnka was inspired by the illustrations for the original book made by Joseph Lado, which in the popular imagination were closely associated with the characters of Hasek. The humorous film is divided into 3 episodes, which tell the grotesque adventures of Svědč during World War I. It received several awards at international festivals. In 1959, he made his last feature film, Sen Nosa Svatojanska, Midsummer Night's Dream, 1959, adapted from one of the most famous works of William Shakespeare. Trnka had previously illustrated this book, so he knew it well. In his adaptation, he put focus on, besides the images, the music of Vaclav Trojan and strove to give the film an air of ballet, for which he even hired as an advisor a renowned dancer. The puppets used in the film were not constructed of wood, but a specially made plastic, which allowed for a more detailed modeling of faces. Although it did not escape some criticism, Sen Nosa Svatojansk was a resounding international success and is recognized as one of Trnka's masterpieces. The 60s. Over the next decade, the filmmaker made only a few short films which were progressively in a pessimistic tone. The first was Vasen, The Passion 1962, the story of a young man passionate about his motorcycle. He followed that same year with Kybernetica Babica Cyber Grandma, a satire on the increasing importance of technology in everyday life. Archandel Gabriel Apani Husa The Archangel Gabriel and MS Goose, 1964, set in medieval Venice, adapts one of the stories of the Decameron by Boccaccio. He considered his greatest work to be the short Ruka the Hand, 1965. In the words of Bendezi, Ruka is a kind of hymn to the creative freedom raging. In short, it is about a sculptor visited by a huge hand, which seeks the completion of a sculpture of itself. By rejecting the imposition, the artist is constantly pursued by the hand, ending with induced suicide, and the hand officiating at his funeral. Ruka is considered a protest against the conditions imposed by the Czechoslovak communist state to artistic creation, and even some have seen in it an anticipation of the so-called Prague Spring. Although the film initially had no problems with censorship, after his death copies were confiscated and banned from public display in Czechoslovakia for 2 decades. Death. Jiří Trnka died of complications from a heart condition in 1969, when he was only 57 years old, in Prague. His funeral, held in Pilsen, was a large public event. Animation techniques. Throughout his career, Trnka experimented with different animation techniques, from traditional cartoons in his first shorts to animation with shadow puppets. However, his preferred method, and that which gave him worldwide fame, was stop-motion puppet work. His carved puppet characters were animated in complex sets with an expressive use of lighting. In this manner he was able to realize the dream of Czech Baroque sculptors to set their sculptures in motion. Of puppet films, Trnka said, "Puppet films are truly unlimited in their possibilities. They can express themselves with the greatest force precisely when the realistic expression of the cinematographic image often faces insurmountable obstacles." Really, Trnka was not involved so much with the animation itself, but primarily on the development of scripts and puppet making. His studio had a trained team of animators, among which especially Bretislav Pajar was credited as responsible for the animation of many of Trnka's films. Other prominent animators from Trnka's studios were Stanislav Latil, Trnka Jan Karpaz, Esramik Bohuslav, František Ziganek Hrabar, and František Braun. Although animated films with puppets had already been made before Trnka, he corresponds to the main thrust of this technique, later used in many parts of the world. Unlike what had been done before, Trnka chose not to alter the appearance of the dolls with artificial elements to denote their emotions, but to keep it unchanged, getting his expression through changes in framing and lighting. According to Pajar, he always gave his eyes a look indefinable, with the simple turn of their heads, or with a change of lighting, rose smiling expressions, or unhappy or dreamers. This gave one the impression that the puppet hid more than it showed, and its heart of wood stored even more. The scripts of the films were also Trnka's own work, who often used works of Czech authors, many of them related to popular folklore, as well as classics of world literature, such as Chekhov. In Trnka animated films, the music also had an important role. In all his films and several of his short films, the composer of the music was Václav Trojan, 1905-1983. Filmography. Short films. Zasadil Dedek Rapu. My grandfather planted a beet, January 1, 1945. Cartoons. Perak, SS Springman and the SS December 20, 1946. Cartoons. Derek the Gift, September 12, 1947. Cartoons. Zivaratka Petrovsky Animals and Bandits, September 12, 1947. Cartoons. Roman S. Basu's Story of a Bass, January 1, 1949. Cert of Emlyn the Devil's Mill, January 1, 1949. Ari Prurai Song of the Prairie, 1949. Ozelate Ribs the Golden Fish, January 1, 1951. Cartoons. Beasley Circus the Gay Circus, January 1, 1951. TVA Imrazisai Two Little Frosts, January 1, 1954. Circus Hervinik, January 1, 1955. Proc UNESCO. Why is the UNESCO, January 1, 1958. Cartoons. Vaesen the Passion, January 1, 1962. Kybernetica Babica the Cybernetic Grandma, January 1, 1962. Archangel Gabriel Apanihusa the Archangel Gabriel and Mrs. Goose, January 1, 1964. Backsplat 1965. Ruka the Hand, October 26, 1965. Feature films. Spalisek the Czech Year, December 13, 1947. Cesarov Slavic the Emperor's Nightingale, April 15, 1949. Ajaja Prince Beea, January 26, 1950. Stairposty Sesk Old Czech Legends, September 10, 1953. Dobry Vajak Stejk, The Good Soldier Schweik, January 1, 1955. Sen Nosy Svatojanska Midsummer Night's Dream, September 25, 1959. Awards. Cannes Short Film of the Year for Zivaratka Petrovsky, 1946.